Hi, Rob. How are you today?
Fine, Michael. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. Well, let me tell you how my morning started, right? I know that if you get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, the one thing you want to read is a 280-page book written by a lawyer to keep you awake. And that's how I started my morning. It was a
On
good morning
ethics.
on ethics. And I knew it was a special book because how many books by lawyers have a pinky orange color on their cover? I haven't seen that before.
I think it's salmon.
It's a salmon,
But
salmon.
the marketing folks say that it's nice and it sells books. So.
Well, it's a good color. I liked it. So when I looked at this book, I thought, okay, this is going to be different. When I read the book, a couple of things jumped out to me. One, I liked your style of writing. You have these little pithy anecdotes that you drop in throughout the book, which I found kept a very good rhythm going. So I enjoyed, the style of writing was not what I expected. I expected almost a legal reduction of how to approach ethics, but it was nothing like that. It was almost a day in the life of Rob, and you were capturing things from your personal journal and diary and remembering key moments with people. But to start, I want to maybe clarify something for the readers. We talk about integrity, which I believe is important and essential, but how do you frame that relative to things like ethics and values? Are they the same for you or are they different?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't distinguish between them, and I will use the terms almost interchangeably.
Okay, good.
We could get out a dictionary probably
Yeah.
and split hairs with it a bit,
Yes.
but I do believe that acting with integrity does mean having values,
Yes.
and I do believe that it means acting ethically. So
Yes.
for purposes of my book, we don't really, I don't distinguish between the terms.
Okay, so when we talk about integrity, we define the ethics and having the right values and doing things that are good for the right reasons.
Right.
Okay, I like this. Let's get into the book, right? I want to talk about a couple of things here that sort of jumped out to me. When I read the book, I was thinking a lot about risk management and the fact that having good principles of integrity or a good framework for integrity is really about risk management. Or is it not about risk management? Because that's the way a company would see the
I
impact.
think it's about a lot more than that, to be
Okay.
honest with you. I think we can start with risk management as part of it.
Yeah.
I think if you act in the right way, you are complying with the law and you're going further,
Okay.
right? You're doing what the law requires. And therefore, from a risk management perspective, I think you are reducing your risk. But I think you're also about building a brand that people trust.
Yes.
And if you build a brand that people trust, you're likely to have fewer issues with employees, fewer issues with customers, fewer issues with government. And again, I think all of that goes to risk management. But I think that even sells the concept short.
Yeah.
Risk management sounds like you are protecting yourself against risk. I view integrity as a superpower, something that actually can drive your business.
Yeah, I like that. You have a
Right?
chapter on that. I really like that.
Yeah, if customers trust you and customers believe that you're trying to do the right thing, I think you inspire a level of brand loyalty that other companies just don't match. So if you look at the data, study after study shows that companies that are at least perceived to have integrity outperform the market and outperform peer companies that are not perceived to have integrity.
And of course, they are backing this up by doing things that show they have integrity, right? It's not just a marketing campaign. To be consistent over 10, 15, 20 years, you have to have the actions to back that up. It's interesting you say that because one of the things we say is that the biggest competitive advantage you have is your value system, provided you have the right value system. And I think you're saying the same thing here as a superpower.
Yeah, there's value in values.
There's values in values. So why is it that it is seen as such a nebulous concept by so many companies? I mean, they talk about it, but really when companies talk about values, it's something that HR, as you say in your book, has delegated down to a mid-level manager in the human resources department to make you sign and tick the box. If it's so important, what are companies missing?
Yeah, I do think that there is a discomfort in talking about integrity. Part of it, I think, sort of stems from this idea that so often people who talk about integrity often are proven to not to be perfect or human, which of course is true. None of us are perfect. We're all human. I have flaws. You have flaws. But it doesn't mean we don't have integrity.
Yes.
But I think people are afraid to talk too much about it because they're worried someone's going to come up to them and say, oh, well, who are you to talk about integrity?
That's a good point.
I know what you did. So I think that's one reason. Number two, I think that there's almost a discomfort in talking about it because people draw parallels with almost religion and your own personal value system. So there's almost a discomfort in telling someone else how what is right or wrong or how they should act, because that's almost viewed as a personal matter in many parts of the world. And I think it is those factors have wrongly gotten executives uncomfortable with talking about it, and therefore they do what they do with all uncomfortable things. They send it to HR and legal and let them deal with it.
So it's really, is it because of Western society we place such a almost utopian interpretation of integrity, whereby we only want to listen to perfect people and we cannot listen to anyone else who has like an 80% strike rate?
That's right. And the truth is no one's perfect.
Yeah.
And therefore, if anyone who makes a mistake is therefore disqualified from talking about integrity, then no one will ever talk about integrity.
It's like, as consultants, we use case studies, but you notice that companies only want to hear about the good case studies. They never want to hear about the companies who failed and why they failed. It's a similar kind of halo effect here.
Yeah, companies have to be comfortable with mistakes.
Yes.
I think that great companies will celebrate mistakes as good opportunities for learning and taking smart risks. Again, when it comes to integrity, we have to, if I do something that is inconsistent with my value system, it means that I'm human. I can still have integrity if I have the self-awareness to recognize that I did something wrong, inconsistent with the way that I strive to be, and then put myself back on the path again to trying to act a particular way. Someone who doesn't have integrity is someone who doesn't care about it at all, doesn't believe that the values are important, and doesn't even try to act that way.
Yeah, so in your book, you talk a lot about the ways you codify. And it's one of the 6 C's you have. But at a certain point, have you not found that you can't write down every rule? It has to be a set of operating principles.
There's a balance here. Mm-hmm. The problem is that integrity thrives in environments where everyone is clear about what the rules are, what the purpose is.
Yeah.
Science. It was interesting. I spent some time with Dan Ariely. He's a behavioral psychologist at Duke University, and he studies lying.
Yes.
He studies dishonest behavior. And what science has taught is that ambiguity and silence, that's where dishonesty thrives. Because as human beings, we all think we have integrity. We're all very kind to ourselves.
True.
We all see the world through our own eyes.
We think we're perfect.
And exactly. And if we give ourselves the benefit of the doubt, and we can rationalize just about any behavior as being ethical. And the problem is, of course, that if everyone is rationalizing their own behavior and looking at it through their own lenses, you quickly get to a world where everyone is acting in their own self-interest, and you end up with environments that anyone would look at and say, that's not an ethical environment. Rules help clarify for everyone what the organization sees as right or wrong. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One is just I came across the other day at Trader Joe's. Mm-hmm. So I know that probably in most parts of the country, hand sanitizer has become the new currency, right?
It's gold.
You can't find hand sanitizer anywhere. Sold out in every store, sold out online. Everybody wants hand sanitizer. I want hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
So I walk into a Trader Joe's, go over to the area where they have hand sanitizer, and of course the shelf's empty. And there's an employee who is at a pallet next to me unloading another item, and I asked the employee, do you have any hand sanitizer? Knowing what the answer would be, right? Because no one's got hand sanitizer. Except the employee looked at me and said, you know what? I think we just got some in. Let me go check. So off he goes. Comes back. He's got a box with 48 small 2-ounce hand sanitizer sprays. He puts the box in front of me. He looks at me and he walks away.
I think this guy knows what you're thinking of doing.
He knows what's on my mind. I know what's on his mind. The store closes in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
What do you do, Michael? What's the ethical path here?
I will take what I need, right?
I can give you several examples. Yeah. And each of these examples would be ethical. So you could buy one.
Yeah.
You could buy, because they're fairly small, you could probably justify buying 2 or 3 for each member of your family, right? Because you have to protect. I've got a couple of kids. I've got a wife. I've got a next door neighbor who's very good about checking the mail for me. Maybe I should pick up 2 or 3 for her as well. Perhaps that path would be ethical. Perhaps I should buy all of them and drop them off at a local retirement home because they probably need it more than I do.
Yeah.
Or I could buy all of them and use it as barter to get toilet paper, which I also have.
That is platinum. If sanitizer is gold.
So what's the ethical course in a situation like this? And I think the answer is, in the absence of any rules, any of those paths could be justified as ethical. But what I would encourage is, why shouldn't the store set up a rule? Why shouldn't the store say, you know what? To ensure that as many customers as possible get access to this limited item, we're going to limit it to 2 per customer per day. Right? So the store could set different rules. They could set 1, they could set 3, they should set 6. It almost doesn't matter. But having an environment where there's a rule that we all live by creates, I think, a better atmosphere and makes it clear. Because if I had bought 1, what do you think the next person was going to come behind me and do?
Probably buy all of them.
Buy the remaining 47.
Yeah.
Right?
And you find that this rules-based guidelines, or rules as you want to call them, they work across all companies, irrespective of the size and the education level of the workforce and so on?
Well, the rules aren't the same.
So the rules are not the same, but you find that the need for rules.
I think the need for rules is the same. And again, I'll give you an example. Walmart. I have a number of friends that worked at Walmart over the years. And they have a rule around accepting gifts from vendors, from third parties. Because employees, vendors are always giving small gifts. They're giving T-shirts, they're giving hats. Maybe they're taking you to dinner. They're buying you coffee. They're sending you a fruit basket at the holidays. What can you accept ethically? And what should you turn down? Another perfect example of a situation where you could have a lot of different rules. Yes. All of the different rules you might choose could be ethical, but you need a common understanding, because otherwise you could quickly get to a world where if you just said, okay, everybody do the right thing. Well, what's the right thing?
Yes.
And if you get offered a pair of Super Bowl tickets, or you get offered use of the vendor's ski condo for a week, somebody, I'm sure, could say, well, that seems perfectly reasonable. I'm sure the vendor ski condo is already paid for, so it doesn't really cost them any money. You could justify anything.
Yes. That makes sense.
Walmart's rule is very simple. Employees at Walmart can accept nothing. 0.
There's no ambiguity.
I've been in a meeting with someone from Walmart where you give them a bottle of water and they pull $1 out of their pocket.
Wow.
Right. And the reason for this is Walmart is fixated on lowest prices for customers. Mm-hmm. And they believe that any gift to their employees ultimately is reflected in cost of goods.
That makes sense.
So because of their mission, because of what they're about as a company, they have a very strict rule. Airbnb is in the hospitality business, so our rule is a little bit more relaxed. It allows you to accept something up to $200 in value. So you could go to dinner. You might even be able to go to a concert or an event with a vendor. But that's because we're in the hospitality business and we have a different take on things. Both rules are ethical. But the absence of a rule is what creates ambiguity that can get folks in ethical trouble.
I actually like this conversation because we tend to assume there's a morally absolute right answer when we talk about decisions around integrity and ethics. But what you're saying, and I like it, is that you got to look at what the purpose of the company is. You got to look at how the company operates and design your rules to reflect what you want to achieve.
That's right. And
I like this.
In addition to that, you got to do two things. One, you've got to get broad input on the rules. So what you don't want is something I call the Moses syndrome, where the CEO goes off and makes up all the rules and then brings them down in a tablet. And
he goes to the beach.
Yeah, well, look, today's workforces are way too global and diverse for one person to have the quote-unquote right perspective. None of us have unique insight into what is right or wrong. So one thing you need to do is you need to get input from your whole team. Get global input from different cultures. For example, kissing someone on the cheek might be highly inappropriate in one part of the world, but normal in another part.
Yes, so normal in Latin America.
Right? So you don't make a rule that is based upon one person thinks. You have to kind of figure out what's going to work for the company. Number two, you have to have the CEO and leadership's buy-in to any rule. You're better off not having a rule at all if it's a rule that's going to be ignored by leadership. And so when I mean bought in, I mean CEO has to follow it, leaders have to follow it, and if an employee breaks it, it doesn't matter if it's a highly valued employee, the best employee in the company. No one's immune. So you got to have leadership buy-in. You've got to have input from a broad, diverse workforce. And then you figure out what works culturally at your company.
So you touched on 2 points I want to raise here. The first one is, let's assume you have a large workforce of, 20,000 employees spread out all over the world. Like most tech companies, they have employees in India, working out of Eastern Europe and so on. I remember a very famous chef said that every time he hires employees, he always tells them, never steal. And they all shake their head and say, yes, we will never steal. And about 30% steal. And when he asked them, why did you steal? They never think what they did is stealing. They think it is that they deserve it. That what they did is simply a reflection of their effort and they were rewarding themselves. They were going to be rewarded anyway. So my question is, how do you get people to really zone in on what is the company's definition of integrity? I mean, there's different focuses, as you pointed out. How do you get that consistency? It seems to be hard to do because people go in thinking they know they already have integrity.
Well, that goes back to my earlier point that people can rationalize their behavior without clarity. So let's take that rule that you just mentioned, never steal. My first thought of that is that is a vague statement. That probably doesn't work in the restaurant business. So
does not work in the restaurant business, no.
Is taking a soda from the machine in the back, is that stealing?
Yes.
Is eating some bread in the bread bin stealing? So what I would do is be extremely clear about what you mean by stealing in that context, what's allowed, what's not allowed. Recognize, and then the thing you might be most clear about is you do not, taking cash from the register is the worst form of theft.
Yes.
Now, if you are extremely clear with people, you are less likely to have violations. I also think that if you treat employees well and recognize them as key stakeholders, they are less likely to take from you because they are bought in and they feel as though they're being treated well. So,
on the one hand, you have to be very specific, but you have to balance it off against the fact that if you're too specific, you're going to have a 100-page manual, which no one's going to read.
Right.
So you've got to treat your employees well so that they don't feel the need to have these breaches.
That's right.
Okay, I like that. So let's just keep on this theme, right? Today, what's going on now with the virus, companies are just focused on survival. I'm thinking it's like the opportune time for some devious minds to break some rules of integrity. How do you advise companies to handle things now when everyone's putting out fires and nobody's really watching for these integrity landmines?
I think now is a time in particular where the ethical behavior of leaders is on display. And how leaders respond in circumstances like this will long be remembered by shareholders, by customers, by employees. I think ethics is actually front and center right now. I'll give you an example again. This is something I read about in the online just the other day. Just a small example of integrity. Mm-hmm. There's a company called Emerald Packaging, mm-hmm. and they are very much in business during this crisis because they are in the business of providing all the packaging materials, like for food, that people need. So obviously very important. The CEO walks into the plant and addresses the employees and says to everyone, if you are sick, I do not want you coming into work. Your health is of paramount importance, and everyone's health is important. Yeah. So if you are sick, do not come in. An employee raises his hand and says, what if I'm the only one that can operate a particular piece of machinery? And if I'm out, everything stops. Yeah. Right? Now that's what I call an integrity moment. Right? You're in front of a number of employees and you've been asked a tough question like that. And the CEO looked at the employee and said, you don't come to work. And he looked at the employee again and said, repeat after me, I won't come to work. And everybody laughed, and the employee said, I won't come to work. And the CEO said, exactly. Okay? Now, in that moment, the CEO sent a critical integrity message to everybody, and that is, your health matters to me. The health of the employees matter to me. And therefore, even if you are the only one that knows how to operate a piece of machinery, we'll figure it out and we'll get through that problem if it happens, but don't come to work. So, contrast that to how a number of other places might have handled a similar situation. In a number of situations, the CEO never would have been on the floor saying that. Yes. They might have had an email from HR. Yes. Right? And buried in there would be a little statement that says, if you're sick, don't come to work. But in reality, out on the floor, you have to come to work. Saying, hey guys, we got to hit this number no matter what. If we got to get these number of packages out, right? Then you're sending a very mixed message, right? Yes. So good. Just these are just some of the examples. I'll give you another example. Times like this, they do challenge a number of companies' ability to survive. Yeah. But a number of companies also, our CEO at Airbnb, Brian Chesnut, he always says, never waste a good crisis. Yeah, I like that. I also say that. Right? There's opportunity in crisis. And what's a few companies have done that I really admire is they've looked at their assets and they've said, what can we do to help? What can we do to actually play a role in helping our broader community here? And one example of that was a company called Bloom Energy. Bloom Energy looked and noticed that the product that they made had a number of similarities to ventilators. Okay? And so they reached out to the state of California and they offered to refurbish California's 200 ventilators that were in need of repair and servicing. And they said, you know what, we can do that work for you. And they took 10 employees and they said to those 10 employees, we want you to do this now. Not because there's any money or any profit, but because it's the right thing for our community as a whole to get these 200 ventilators back in action as quickly as possible. That's the sort of thing that employees are really inspired by, and things that communities and government will remember for a long time. That, look, this company is not just out to make a buck out of this. The company actually cares and is trying to do the right thing for the broader community.
It seems as if we're kind of segueing into a discussion on what is good capitalism. How do you be a capitalist who's not just going to take money, but think about the role he or she has as a member of the community And when is the right time to know I'm going to take a loss to protect the community? And when is the right time I'm going to try to make a profit? And I think sometimes companies don't think about that. They're so shareholder driven.
Yeah, it's at the very heart of the question, what is the role of a company?
Yeah.
And, for decades, the answer has been a simple answer. I think it was actually, in a lot of respects, easy to be a leader for decades, in that you had one job, get the stock price up.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes, hit that quarterly number, and if your stock price is up, then you're doing a good job.
And you get a big bonus.
You get a big bonus for it, right? That's a single stakeholder world. The world is moving very quickly and very definitively in the other direction, because that single stakeholder world doesn't really take into account how that company is impacting the world. Is the company dumping things into the river from their factories? Are they polluting the environment with their product? Are they treating their suppliers on the other side of the world well?
Yes.
How are they treating their employees? And there have been a number of very valid criticisms of single stakeholder capitalism.
Yes.
And that's why even the Business Roundtable, which is one of the venerated organizations of capitalism, even they have now stated that companies have a broader role than just a single stakeholder.
Yeah.
They have a broader obligation to have multiple stakeholders. And the typical what people are now realizing is that you've got at least 4 stakeholders. Most companies, they've got their shareholders or investors, and they're very important. But employees are important stakeholders. Customers are important stakeholders. And so is the community at large where you operate. So what you need to do as a company now is you need to be thinking about, in all of your major decisions, what is the impact of this decision going to be on each of these 4 stakeholders? And that means it's a lot more complicated as a leader, because you've got to balance. It's rare that you have an answer that will benefit all 4 stakeholders at the same time. And there are times where you need to cut down on the side of one or the other.
And let's be fair, it's a discussion about money. It's a trade-off about how much you're going to give up to do the right thing and make the investment for the future.
Well, that's it. It may not even be a pure money versus right thing. It's actually a lot of times short-term versus long-term.
Yes.
Am I going to do the right thing for this week's stock price? Or am I going to do something that may cost me money now, but it's going to build trust in my community, or trust with my customers, or trust with my suppliers, that will, in the long run, help me be a stronger, more valuable company?
And it's an interesting discussion, because you could say all those things, and you could be an absolutely committed and sincere CEO about thinking 5-10 years into the future and making sure you hand over a company that has left the right legacy. But if you reward your employees to do short-term things, they're going to act in their short-term interests.
We've got to rethink how we reward employees then.
Yes.
I think if executives are rewarded based upon purely quarterly results, or are incented by stock that they can immediately cash out and walk away from, you're going to get short-term thinking.
Yes. Your book did one thing I thought very well. When you were discussing the Me Too movement, you gave an example of how if you ask out an employee, or you compliment her too much where she becomes uncomfortable, the fact is that you may think it's just something you did because you're drunk. But that person has a family that is depending on her. And she has to then make the decision whether she wants to come into work the next day and put up with this. And what you did is you kind of showed the other side, because whenever we think about these issues, I always think about the victim, but we don't realize the victim has dependents. And it's a whole way of it, because people always say it's a mistake, I didn't mean to do it, but you're affecting more than one person.
Relationships and work they're a dangerous combination.
Yeah,
and that's
toxic
not to
sometimes,
suggest, right? It's not to suggest that you can't date a coworker. I mean, I think the data shows that over 40% of us at some point will date someone that we met through work.
40%.
Yeah, and by the way, I think it's like 15 or 20% will marry somebody that they met from work.
I got to tell my sound editor this, because we work together a lot.
Yeah, you know what? It's human nature a bit, and occasionally it works out. But the truth is, though, when things don't work out, when they go bad, if a relationship doesn't work in your personal life, hopefully you can just walk away from it.
Yes.
But when it doesn't work at work, now you're impacting not just your emotional love life, but you're also impacting two people's employment and interfering with it. And therefore, I think it's smart for companies to implement some basic rules around what sort of relationships are permissible.
Yeah, you also gave the example of how, there were a couple of examples, but number one you talked about whereby the person who had an affair got fired and their superior, their manager, got fired. So it's not just the people involved in the relationship who get impacted, it's sometimes many other careers are pulled down.
Yeah, it's there's nothing can disrupt a team more and undermine trust in a leader than if a leader is having a relationship with someone on a team.
And people always know, right? You can never hide it. I've never seen it successfully hidden.
Right. People find out. They know.
People always find out.
Always seem to find out, and it often goes badly. And you know what it does? It creates distrust on the team. Because look, as a leader, one thing you need to do, it's like being a parent. Like I got two kids. I love them both, and I'm not going to do anything that would ever give either of them the chance to think that I love one more than the other.
Yes.
And the same thing at work. You know, when I had when I was general counsel, I had 7 direct reports, 7 wonderful human beings. I wasn't friends with any of them.
Yeah.
And the reason I wasn't friends with any of them was that if I'm a good friend with one of them, the others are what are they going to think? They're going to think that my friend is getting the best assignments, the more headcount, the best budget, the best promotion opportunities. Whether that's true or not, I'm creating a perception of unfairness, a perception of a conflict. And if I'm dating someone on my team, I have a conflict every day between doing the right thing for my team and doing the right thing for my relationship. And you can't put yourself in that position as a leader.
But that's a good story, because a lot of times we get focused on really extreme cases of abuse or conflict of interest. But here's an example where friendship, if not managed carefully, which is the most common form of a conflict of interest if you think about it.
Yeah.
Right? I like that. That's a good analogy. So let's just switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about something else in the book. You have this quote in one of the chapters, who you do business with defines you.
Yeah.
And I like that, because a lot of companies put up a certain image. But when you dig behind the scenes and you see who they choose to have as their suppliers, it paints a very different picture.
I think it does. You can't profess to have integrity as a company.
Yes.
While then hiding or running from those that you do business with.
Yes.
You see this a lot in platform businesses. Let's take, I'll pick on YouTube.
Okay, let's pick on YouTube.
I think YouTube actually is doing a lot of good things now. They make money from their post.
Yes.
But suppose the post is racist. Suppose is offensive. It contains graphic violence. Well, for a long time, what did you hear from platforms? But we're only a platform.
Yes.
We're not in the business of judging.
We're not editors. We don't have any control.
No, we don't have any control over it. Just because it's on our site doesn't mean we agree with it. I think in reality, it's hard to separate yourself from those that you're doing business with and those that you're making money from. And by the way, I think YouTube has done a really nice job. They have a team of people now that they have very clear rules, very clear criteria. They go through and they prevent and remove postings that do not comport with their own rules. And their rules, by the way, are an outgrowth of their values as a company.
So let's just talk a little bit about your career, right? You started in I think the Justice Department, is that right?
I did, yes.
So how did you find making that transition into the private sector?
I was anxious to do it. I was a federal prosecutor for a number of years. I prosecuted bank robbers, spies, drug dealers.
You had an exciting life. When are they going to make a movie about you?
It's very, that all sounds exciting. Yeah. I'd say your first 10 bank robberies are really exciting. Yeah. By the time you get to number 20, 30, 40, 50, and I'm not exaggerating, they come in. You realize that the people that are doing these bank robberies are really sad individuals who are often driven to the crime by an addiction to drugs.
Yes.
Or take the drug dealers. Sad lives. Young people who didn't have a strong presence at home, didn't have two parents, didn't have one parent, didn't have much hope in life. So as a prosecutor, I really found that I was I was presiding over the sort of the end of a human life. Wow. I was putting young people away for many, many years. And at some point I said, what, is this going to define me?
Yeah.
I'd rather do something positive. What could I do that would have a positive impact on the world and have a broad impact? And fortunately, there was this tiny little company. I was a prosecutor in Northern Virginia. Yeah. There was this little company that I kept getting phone calls about.
Yeah.
Prosecutors from other parts of the country would send me, they'd call me and they wanted to get records from this company or they wanted to prosecute this company.
Yeah.
And after about my fifth phone call about this company, I said, I got to look into this company. And the name of the company was AOL, American Online, in Reston, Virginia. So I got back in the old days, I'm sure you've probably read books about this, but back then they used to send you discs.
Yeah.
Right? And you stick a disc in your computer and you plug your phone
A floppy disk.
Yeah, and that was how you got online. Yeah. And so I was an early adopter of the internet simply because I happened to be a prosecutor in a place where America Online was headquartered. And that really opened my eyes. I started going online and I started using eBay. And I thought, wow, this company is connecting people all over the world with common interests.
Yeah.
They're creating a very efficient marketplace. It looks like a great business. And I bet I can help them.
Yeah.
I bet they got illegal items. I bet they got fraud. I bet they've got government regulation. So, I went online. They were headquartered in San Jose, California. I was an East Coast guy. I had been to Disneyland once.
Yeah.
But I didn't even know where San Jose was within California, to be honest with you. They didn't have any jobs. So I sent my resume to jobs@ebay.com.
Yeah.
And to my shock, the next day I got home from work and there was a message on my voicemail saying, we'd like you to fly out and meet you. And I was a week later, I'm having dinner with Meg Whitman, the CEO. It turned out the company only had 170 people.
Yeah.
A month later, I've moved to the West Coast, and I'm a tech lawyer all of a sudden for eBay. So it was a great transition for me. I was extremely fortunate just to be at the right place at the right time.
So it sounds like this is the first time ever when you apply online, someone calls you back for a job.
Yeah, I know, right? I've been very fortunate in my online life experience.
So you started eBay. One of the things that struck me was unusual about the way you operated is that a lot of times when chief counsels at tech companies or any companies engage the government, they do it in a very hostile way. Yeah. But you give a lot of examples where you were very proactive of reaching out to the Justice Department. Do you feel that's because you were in government and you could see the benefits?
Oh, there's no doubt. I think back when I joined eBay, it was really rare for government lawyers to go into the private sector. And so what you had was this world where you had private sector law firm type lawyers, and their experiences with the government were probably pretty negative for the most part. I was a government lawyer, so I actually came in with a pretty high level of trust. And I also believed from my time as a prosecutor that if you proactively go to the government, you get treated a lot better than
Yes.
if the government comes knocking on your door.
Same if you go to the IRS and tell them in advance that you didn't pay your taxes correctly.
Right. So so I figured, my first test with this, I think it was my first month at eBay.
Yeah.
I told the story in the book about getting an email from a user who says, "You all are all going to jail at eBay because you're selling jarts."
Yeah, I remember that story.
Right? And I was like, well, what's a jart? I didn't know what a jart was. So I go on to eBay, type in jart. And it turned out that the jarts are lawn darts. They have these metal tips like a dart, these big plastic fins. And some company had got the bright idea of creating a kids game.
That does not sound safe to me.
Right, into these rings on your lawn. And what happened was kids started showing up in emergency rooms with these things coming out of all parts of their body.
Wow.
Because kids would throw darts at each other. So the items ended up getting banned by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. But people were selling them on eBay because it was sitting in their garage. And that was a moment for me when I saw we had these jarts. What ran through my mind was, oh, this isn't good. And how many other recalled items do we have on eBay? And what in the world could we possibly do to stop it? And it struck me that at some point the government was going to figure that out.
Yes.
There's no hiding it. And it was not going to be an easy thing for us to overcome. So I picked up the phone and I called the General Counsel of the Consumer Product Safety Commission in D.C.
Yeah.
And I said, hi, I used to be a federal prosecutor down the street from you. And now I'm at this internet company on the West Coast. And we got a problem. Can I come talk to you? And I got on a plane, flew to Washington, sat in a room with him, and told him about the jart story. And said, you know what? I'd love to create a partnership with you.
Yeah.
Because it's not in your interest to see this stuff online. Let's work together to get recalled products off the internet. And they loved it. The head of the Consumer Product Safety Commission went on TV morning shows, talk about how they were working proactively with an internet company. And we didn't have to have a solve. All we needed to do was tell the government that we cared and we were willing to work with them. And we forged a partnership that worked very well for both the government and eBay. And I think that was the best way to address the problem. And again, I think it was an example of how to deal with the problem with integrity. I didn't care about how much money we might lose from banning jarts. I was worried about what would happen to our customers. And by focusing on the right thing for a stakeholder like customers and trying to do the right thing by the government, I think we did quite well out of this problem.
Do you feel there's now an opportunity to... Well, let's just, before we get into that question, do you feel that the government has a role to play in helping companies have more integrity?
Sure. I think government can help define what integrity means. Mm-hmm. Because, again, everybody's got their own definition.
Yes, that's true.
But I think that, just like the example I gave with a code of ethics, the government can't simply sit in its government office and make all the rules and then hand them out.
Yes.
They need to call the companies, sit down with the companies, and say, let's work together. Yeah. Help educate us. Let's come up with rules that make sense for everybody. And then let's all abide by them. And so I think government plays an important role in helping work with companies to define the rules, encouraging the rules to be followed. And then ultimately there have to be consequences for those that still don't follow, and they play a role there as well.
It seems to be, at least in the United States, I think, almost an antagonistic view between how legal departments are now engaging governments. I don't know who's at fault, but it seems to be nobody's talking. What would you recommend could be some way to break that stalemate?
Well, we've got to do a better job of establishing relationships of trust between government and companies. I think companies look at government sometimes as being very political and grandstanding to take it, to try to take advantage of a low level of trust among consumers with companies. Government, I'm sure, looks at companies and feels like they're greedy capitalists who are just trying to make a buck, who don't really care about multiple stakeholders. We need first of all, I think we need more people moving between government and private companies so that we have a better level of understanding of what each are trying to accomplish. And I think companies have got to step up with a multi-stakeholder approach. And I think when companies try to act with integrity to the benefit of all their stakeholders, because it's the right thing to do, ultimately that will improve the relationship with government. And we certainly have to do something, though, about the level of antagonism that exists today.
And do you think that will change or get worse as you see more? Well, now we're talking about tech. Let's just stay on tech. As more foreign tech companies start operating in the United States and being successful?
I think that the relationship is ultimately going to get better because the world is pushing all companies to bring integrity into what they do. And by the way, I think climate change is making that a necessity. Just as one example. But look, customers are pushing companies to act this way. Government is pushing companies to act this way. So I think what you're going to see is that companies are gradually going to wake up to the idea that they need to make integrity a key part of the way they do business, and that ultimately everyone will win with that kind of an approach.
That's interesting. So you, in the end of your book, I noticed you spent a lot of time talking about diversity.
Yeah.
You ended off on diversity. Was it a conscious decision?
Yeah, because I think what I learned in my time in tech is so often if I walk into a room and everybody looks like me, we don't make very good decisions, right? To me, one of the great values of diversity is the fact that it brings different life experiences, different perspectives to the table on problems. I'll give you an example. Airbnb, right after I joined the company, Airbnb became embroiled in an embarrassing set of episodes where guests were being discriminated against. They were not able to get bookings, or they were struggling to get bookings. And what I found at the company was people were shocked. The company was based in San Francisco, which I think generally tends
very
to
liberal,
very progressive in its thinking like this. But everyone in the company was shocked at the idea that hosts would use the platform to discriminate. And I also noticed that Airbnb itself inside the company wasn't very diverse.
Yes.
And what struck me was, if we had more employees of color, we wouldn't have been shocked. Because so many people who were sitting in the offices had never been victims of discrimination themselves. And if we had more employees who had actually lived discrimination and experienced it themselves, then maybe we would have seen it earlier, and we would have been able to address it without it becoming such an awful public episode for the company. And by the way, I think the company has done a great job of recovering. The company has put a premium on diversity and made good progress, and made a good progress on the discrimination problem as well. But that's just one illustration of how diverse companies make better decisions.
But I like this example because you're not just saying diversity is good. You're saying it's good because you can see things from a consumer perspective and be proactive rather than being reactive and avoiding a public relations nightmare that's going to cost you a lot.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever a good thing when you look different than your customers. Right?
I like that.
If you look different, if you come from different backgrounds, if you have different experience than your customers, then ultimately you aren't going to understand your customer.
That's a good way of saying it, because rather than talking about diversity, which has become a meaningless word, I think, because people just use it and they don't know what it means, you're talking about how do we build things that our customers want if we don't know our customers?
That's right.
How do we be good capitalists if we don't know our customers? How do we make money if we don't know what our customers want?
Right.
It's a very simple construct. Okay, fantastic. So I've used up the time I have been allocated. Is there anything you want to add before we wrap up?
Writing this book, it is my hope that it will help kickstart a conversation and encourage companies to intentionally make integrity part of their agenda, part of their culture, and part of the way that they operate. So, I appreciate the platform you've given me today to talk about this, and I hope people go out, read the book, and take it to their company. And start a conversation there, because you write a book because you want to have impact, and I think this is an area that is important to the world. We need companies. We need the experience. We need their resources. The world needs companies to step up and help solve some of the world's biggest problems. And I think if we recognize the value of integrity, it will help us accomplish those things.
Yeah, but I'll make it even more blunt, I think, because I like to do that, is the fact that what you said, it's a serious competitive advantage today.
Yeah.
This is not just about being nice, which you are going to be. It's not about being progressive, which you will be. It's not about just making people feel good. It will allow you to positively differentiate yourself in the eyes of your consumers. And it ultimately means more money for everyone. Yeah. It is a serious competitive advantage. So I think when people are wanting to read the book, I mean, if people know firms consulting, in our books, the first chapter is on ethics. We don't put it at the end. We think you got to start there as the filter, and then everything you do needs to be interpreted through that filter. So I agree with you. I think it's a good book. But what I would recommend people do is take the principles and then interpret it for themselves and adjust it for their own environment. Because I think that's something you've made very clear, that each company is going to have its own set of rules and guidelines.
Yeah, people that buy the book, if they expect that it will that reading the book will give them integrity, or that it will give them the specific all of the answers to all of their tough ethical questions at work, I think they'll be disappointed. But what I think they will find is it will give them a framework for thinking through these issues, and it will give them a powerful argument for making it a front and center issue at their company.
Yeah, the way I see it working very well is whereby if you are working at any company, you should get a few copies for your colleagues as a starting point for a conversation.
Yeah.
And then you can say, okay, this is what's happening elsewhere. This is what we see working, not working. What do we do about it? Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rob. An absolute pleasure.
I enjoyed it, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Take care. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed doing the episode. Finally, I want you to remember that the only way to get access to our special offers, the only way to get our special pricing, and the only way to get samples of our content is to join the list on firmsconsulting.com. It's the only way also to get access to our unique advanced content that we make available to insiders. So if you want to get a sneak peek of things, test it out, see what's in there, this is the place to go. And finally, I want to thank you again for making us one of the largest podcast channels around the world for careers and for the 2 million downloads and counting.